Hey guys, it's Steve here from stevepigottmusic.com, and today I'm going to be answering a viewer question that was left in the comments section of my How to Play Like Jimi Hendrix number 6 video. And here's how the question goes. It's from a user called STB Retired 1, and he says, I think you're missing the point, or maybe I am. You are obviously formally trained in music and guitar. People like Jimi Hendrix on guitar and Jerry Lee Lewis on piano were not. So how do those untrained people manage to make the right sounds when they don't know a sharp from a flat or a diminished chord from an augmented chord? Just watch their hands as they're playing. They might as well have hams on the ends of their arms as they pound away. There is no fingering. So how do they make those sounds we love to hear? Okay, there are two questions that I'm going to draw out of this comment, and there are a few questions in there. There are also some interesting assumptions too about my musical background, about their musical background, and about their technical facility. There's a reference to their fingering and so on as being ham-fisted and so on. So we'll ignore all that and just look at the underlying question that STB Retired 1 is asking. And so I think there are two really. The first one is, how did Jimi Hendrix and Jerry Lee Lewis and people like that, how did they make the music they made? To what degree were they informed by Western harmonic concepts, or what we'd say is music theory? And so I'll answer in very brief. And the second question is about the role of theory in learning anything at all. The role of theory in art. It's a bit of a broader question, so I'm going to economize my answer a bit. Regards to the first one, we never really know what influences us and how much of something we've heard or learned, whether it's theory or a lick we've learned, or maybe a concept that we overheard some people talking about, or a feeling that we're feeling, from where that comes from. We'll never really know what leads to or what causes the effect of certain actions, like playing the guitar a certain way. So we don't really know that. It's a sort of philosophical point. But we can certainly identify influences. And we can understand the musical context in which certain innovators found themselves and the sort of synthesis of these influences that led to their unique innovation. And Jimmy was a session guy. Before he was Jimi Hendrix, and he played with Ike and Tina Turner, among others. And he was certainly around jazz musicians or people who knew things about theory. So he may have picked a few things up, maybe not. But one thing that is for sure, when you're playing a lot, when you play all the time, you develop concepts that link the information together. You may discover, that note sounds really nice when the chord of a blues changes to that second chord in the blues, which would be called a 4 chord, in music theory. Oh wow, this note, that sounds so nice. I'm going to remember that note in relationship to that chord sounds good. It doesn't really matter if you know that note is the major third of the new chord you're going to, if you can relate to it in a sort of chord tone theory kind of way. Or if you think it's just a sweet note or a bluesy note, or you might think of it as a blues note, or you might think of it as I don't know, if you're a mystical kind of guy, you might say, this is the unicorn string, or the unicorn note. You're describing the same thing, the same chord note relationship, whatever you call it. So concepts do develop, regardless of whether or not they match standard Western harmony, the sort of thing you might get taught in a music school, as STB Retired 1 was saying, if you're formally trained, should we say. So Jimmy and these people, they certainly would have had concepts, working concepts, that allowed them to navigate through music, the music that they played. Limited they may be, or just different to Western theory, who knows. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the role of theory, okay? There's a sort of implication, and you hear this a lot, there's sort of a question, it's a really good question. Jimi Hendrix didn't know his, XYZ theory concept, and he did quite good, to say it mildly. Why do I have to learn it? Why should I learn it if Jimmy didn't need it, Well, there are lots of things to say about that, but let's just talk maybe usefully about the role of theory. So, theory really Well, let's first talk about learning. Imitate, assimilate, innovate. Imitating is where, and this is what all the guys do, and you still can't get around doing this. You listen to the music you love and you copy it somehow or another, whether it's tabs, or if you can read music, or you just figure it out by your ear, or you have a friend show you, put your finger there, or you get it from one of my videos or something, guitar teacher somewhere, whatever. You think, oh, I love that sound, I love that thing, and you go and learn it, you imitate it, and you practice, and you copy it, and you do it again and again. It sinks into your bones. This is how we acquire vocabulary. This is how we acquire, the language with which to express, ourselves on the guitar. Typically, through initially at least, through imitation of stuff that we love, and it makes us go, oh, I love that sound. And then there's assimilate. And theory is useful for assimilation. Theory can help us understand and analyze the sounds we enjoy. Really what it is, it's a way of describing frequencies and vibrations, which is what sound is, produced from an instrument, in relationship with each other. We interpret these relationships, these frequencies and vibrations and their relationship, we interpret it as music, as humans. We like it gets us going. Certain relationships we like more than others between these frequencies. In a way, music theory is a way of describing and codifying, or translating into words and concepts into the mind, these relationships between those things. It's about relationship. And we call these notes and things, we call them scales. We call them notes, and then we combine them into scales, and we combine them into chords, and we put them all together, and put nice ones with nice ones and bad ones with bad ones when we want to sound bad, and we create these combos of vibrations and frequencies, and we have names for them: the major scale, the minor scale, Mixolydian, a G chord, a major chord, a minor chord, a diminished chord, and so on. You don't need to, you can call them whatever you want, but they are a thing. They're a set of, of vibrations, you might say. And, many very clever people over time, including, all the way back to people like Pythagoras and goodness knows what, have, noticed these relationships and seen patterns in them and applied systems to them and figured out ways of codifying them, and there are far-reaching implications of these relationships in geometry, other areas of mathematics, and in all sorts of funny ways, these sorts of relationships show up. You can ask Pythagoras about that. So, in practice, though, when it comes to music, in practice, this theory, it creates a web of concepts that helps to tie the logs, the random logs, if you want, of information, if you imagine logs on a stream, into a workable raft, So maybe, a little bit of a scale over here, a little bit of a chord over there, some licks, some songs. With an understanding of theory, a sort of a bigger picture understanding, you might say, of music in general, you'll be able to see how those things relate to each other, and you'll be able to use them in combination with each other confidently. You'll be able to jailbreak licks from one song and put them in another song and know where to put them. It's handy for that. It can't replace, theory doesn't replace the hours you spend on your instrument. Of course not. It can't. It can't. But it certainly helps you understand some of what's going on musically. The relationships. Helps you recognize, analyze, learn, and replicate certain sonic relationships in sound that you find pleasing and that would you and I would call music. So it's handy in that sense. It's also handy for communicating between musicians. To quickly tell someone a chord progression, or if you want to, record a symphony or a chorale or something like that, and there's no CDs available. Maybe if you're Bach, for instance, it's nice to be able to write something down that's, systemized in a certain sense that other people could understand. So there's lots of cool ways, just being able to say to a guy in a blues jam, it's in the key of A, is quite a useful piece of theory to have, So, yeah. And anyway, then it comes to innovation. So we have assimilate, where you copy and imitate where you copy, assimilate where you get it all metabolized, and you start to make it your own way. Innovate, the creation, you might say. Now, there's all sorts of models for innovation, including synthesis, emotional, all different sorts of models. One thing's for sure, you'll always sound like you, no matter what you play in the innovation. In other words, even if you sound like you trying to sound like Jimi Hendrix, then you're going to sound like you trying to sound like Jimi Hendrix. If you could sound like you trying not to sound like Jimi Hendrix, and you're going to sound like you trying not to sound like Jimi Hendrix, you might sound like you expressing, soaking every note with a unique cocktail of sensations and experiences and arisings that make up your experience of the moment. Your emotions and your memories and the smell in the room and whatever it is, whatever you're feeling, you put it into every note, and you're going to sound like you doing that. Or you might sound like you really stuck up trying to get it right with no real emotional content, you're going to sound like you as well. You can't with music, with the guitar. What's interesting, it's like a mirror. You're always going to sound exactly like you, whatever you is, however you is sort of showing up in that moment. So the theory aspect, it helps with the learning, it helps with the assimilation, and it helps with the innovation. The ability to see relationships and think laterally and rearrange them and synthesize different musical and relationships and into one, and take a bit of soul and a bit of blues and a bit of rock and make something kind of new, or take a bit of jazz or take a bit of Chick Corea and mix it with some Herbie Hancock and mix it with some Angus Young, and you come up with something interesting. Most of this synthesis is unconscious. It's already been done in the mixing of your influences through learning what you love, learning the music you love, and assimilating it through practicing and using it in different contexts and so on. And whatever comes out, it's always going to sound like you. Do you have to learn theory? No. Theory, technique, these things don't really have much direct correlation with the value of the art. Great art can be created with very little technique. And you can have wonderful technique, but create art that, it's not very moving to people, So it's not that important. I mean, if you love guitar, and I do, and if you want to know, wow, what is Jimmy doing there? I love that. Let me play that. Now I want to replicate that pleasing sound in another context. Maybe on a session with a soul artist, I want to put a bit of Jimmy in there. And I may not even think of it like that. It's long since been learned and assimilated, but it pops out as something that I feel, oh, that would be nice here. It's nice to have the facility, the technique. There's that Charlie Parker quote where he basically says to learn your instrument, learn, practice, get all the theory and the studying, everything you can get done. And then when you get up on the bandstand, when it comes to the gig, when it comes to perform, just wail.